Well, hi there. This is a pronghorn antelope. It's not an antelope. If anything, it's a giraffe. But like antelopes and river dolphins, which aren't dolphins, it is an ungulate. Part of one of the most diverse and unusual clades of extant mammals, the clade Euungulata, the true ungulates. This distinction was made to differentiate them from several Afrotherian groups that have, in the past, been classified as ungulates as well. And there is still some debate today as to whether or not the true ungulates are even one another's closest relatives. But if so, it would mean that the largest land mammal ever known to have existed, as well as the largest mammal the world has ever seen, were both part of this amazing clade. Not too shabby. So our current understanding of the phylogenetic position of the true ungulates is that they are most closely related to the carnivora, an awesome mammalian group that we just covered a couple of months ago. So giraffes, for example, are more closely related to lions and tigers and bears than they are to elephants. Heck, they're more closely related to bats than they are to elephants. So I think you can see why the Afrotherians are no longer considered to be ungulates. Because if giraffes and elephants were both ungulates, then you would be too. Because you are more closely related to a giraffe than a giraffe is to an elephant. The reality is that the only mammals less closely related to giraffes than are elephants are the monotremes and the marsupials. But we'll dig a bit deeper into all of that this November when we release our feature-length documentary on all of the mammals. So be sure to subscribe and click the little bell if you don't want to miss that. But right now, I want to dig into the Euungulata, what they are and how they're related. In general, Euungulates are hoofed eutherian mammals that walk mostly or entirely on the tips of their toes, unguligrade. Many also with head-mounted weapons like horns, antlers, or ossicones. A hoof consists of a hard rubbery sole where the continuously growing nail wraps around the tip of the toe, forming a hard wall. And we'll dig into the different types of head weaponry when we get to them. There are more. Lots more. This group excels in noggin spikes. Probably the best head weaponry since the ceratopsians went extinct at the end of the Cretaceous. About the same time that the first recognizable Euungulates seem to have come onto the scene, which was in North America, so it is possible that a Euungulate has come face to face with a Triceratops at some point. Today, the Euungulates are divided into two main clades that can be identified primarily by the number of hooved tippy toes on which they stand, if they stand at all. Some can't stand. And it's not so much a matter of the exact number as it is whether or not that number is even or odd. For example, a modern horse stands on one toe, odd. A cow stands on two, even. The odd-toed ungulates fall into the clade Parasertherum, which literally means odd toes. And the even-toed ungulates into the clade Artiodactyla, which means even toes. This is how scientific naming is supposed to work, by the way. Today, there are only about 17 species of odd-toed ungulates alive in 3 families. We could very reasonably make a video covering all 17 species of them at some point in the future, so let me know if you're into that kind of thing. The oldest evidence of this group comes from the very beginning of the Cenozoic in both North America and Asia. Though since all of the North American perissodactyls appear to have gone extinct about 10,000 years ago, native species are today only found in Europe, Asia, Africa, and South America. Of the 17 species, 7 of them fall into the family Equidae, the horse family, which includes not only horses, but asses and zebras, as well as a host of extinct groups. And though we tend to think of horses as being introduced to the Americas by the Spaniards, they actually first evolved in the Americas, and were here for about 54 million years, only becoming extinct on the continent very recently. Though the earliest equids were small, like the size of a fox, with 4 toes on each front foot and 3 on the back, today's equids are larger, with only a single toe. They are the only single-toed ungulates, so that alone will differentiate them from anything else in the group. And while we're on the subject of horse toes, I want to talk for just a moment about that unguligrade stance. Horses are pretty notorious for having knees and elbows that bend backward. The thing is that I know of no vertebrates that have knees or elbows that bend backwards. In fact, horse limbs bend in the exact same way as your limbs. It is just that most people have no idea which joints they're looking at when they look at a horse, And this has a lot to do with the fact that they are not just standing on their toes like a carnivoran, but on the tips of their toes, making their legs extra confusing. With Father's Day approaching, I've been thinking a lot about my dad. And truth is, I think about my dad a lot because I talk to him on the phone almost every day. And the reason that I do this is legitimately because of my Raycon wireless earbuds. They're just great. They're so good for the quality of my phone calls. And I don't have to use my hand or hold a phone the whole time. We can just talk while I'm doing other things. I honestly don't leave the house without my Raycon earbuds. They're incredibly comfortable, probably the most comfortable earbuds I've ever worn. And they stay put no matter what I'm up to. The active noise cancellation is great for blocking out distractions when the house gets noisy, because I'm a dad too. But if I need to keep an ear out for family or work, a quick tap switches me into awareness mode. The battery life is amazing. Even with daily use, I rarely have to think about charging. They last up to 32 hours with the charging case, and if I forget, just 10 minutes of charging gives me 90 minutes of listening. And I've got to say, these protective cases look and feel great. Mine are forest green, but they come in a bunch of colors to match any dad's style. So if you're looking for a great Father's Day gift that's both thoughtful and actually useful, these are it. They deliver premium quality at about half the price of other top brands, and Raycon backs them with a 30-day happiness guarantee. So if you don't like them, you can send them back. But you're going to like them. Head over to buyraycon.com/Clint to get 15% off site-wide. That's buyraycon.com/Clint, or just click the link in the description below. Big thanks to our friends at Raycon for sponsoring today's video, and thanks to all of you for supporting our channel. Now let's get back to it. So let's start at the shoulder of a horse. That joint is pretty normal. It's just that it's much higher on the body than most people realize. And that's because it has musculature and skin that hold it somewhat in place, and the legs can swing forward right at the bottom of the chest. And many people therefore think that this is the shoulder, but it isn't. That's their elbow. The shoulder is more at the front of the chest, and the humerus, this comical bone here, is actually relatively short. So that is the elbow. This joint here that most people think is their backwards elbow is actually their wrist. But one of the main reasons that it doesn't look like a wrist, other than the fact that you didn't know where their elbow was, is because there is another joint after that. Of course, you have one of those too. And you find something very similar on the hind legs. The hip joint is up on the body and almost unnoticeable, again attached by musculature and skin. The first joint that you likely see is the knee, but since it's all the way up, almost right against the body, it seems like it must be the hip. What looks like a backwards knee is the ankle, and the last joint is the hinge between the elongated foot bones and the toe. And we're going to see this basic pattern across the Euungulata, though in all cases with more toes, which makes it a little easier to tell where the foot stops and the toes begin. The 10 remaining species in the Parasertherum fall into two families that are both more closely related to one another than they are to the equids, with both families having 4 or 5 species. Those two families are the family Tapiridae, the tapirs, and the Rhinocerotidae, the rhinoceroses, both of which are simply special creatures. And the delightful thing about modern Parasertherum is that, heck, what are you going to confuse with them? And even given that the basic form of a tapir and a rhino are very similar, I mean, are you going to confuse them with one another? Tapirs seem to have appeared in Europe, though today they only remain in South and Central America and Asia. While they aren't even the largest trunked animals in Asia, they are the largest native land animals in South and Central America today, with some getting as large as about 300 kilos, or around 660 pounds. All tapirs have oval-shaped ears with white tips, J-Lo-style hindquarters with short tails, 4 front toes and 3 in the rear, like ancient horses, and trunks on their faces. And it's pretty crazy how similar the tapirs are to one another, considering that their chromosomal numbers range from 52 to 80, 26 pairs to 40 pairs. The fact that they have a trunk makes it very unlikely that you will confuse them with anything else alive today. And it also means that they have some crazy looking skulls. And while nasal appendages are not the only way to distinguish them from their closest extant cousins, it should get the job done. Not many people find it difficult to identify a rhinoceros, though some of their closest relatives, including the largest land mammal perhaps ever, might throw some people for a loop. I mean, if you can imagine a long-necked hornless rhino, taller than a giraffe and weighing 2 to 3 times as much as an elephant, well, that would be Parasertherum, the closest known relative of the rhinoceratids. But rhinoceratids are much smaller, today rarely getting over 2,300 kilograms, which is just a tad over a dainty 5,100 pounds, which still makes them the largest land ungulates alive today, but smaller than all 3 species of elephants, and way, way smaller than some of the sea ungulates. Their basic body shape is similar to that of a tapir. And being found in Asia, as well as Africa, I guess you could be somewhere where you would need to be able to tell the difference. But their ears are pointier, they have less hair, 3 toes on their front feet as well as the hind feet, and don't have much junk in their trunks, or trunks at all for that matter. Oh, and they have horns on their faces. At least modern rhinos. Though horn might not be the right word for it, as horns generally have a bony core surrounded by a keratin sheath. In rhinos, the entire horn is made of keratin. It's like a big fingernail stuck on their noses. Anyway, I'm looking forward to taking a deep dive into every species of this rad clade. But we have a much larger and somewhat more confusing and bizarre clade left to discuss. By larger, I mean way larger. Like more than 20 times larger. Around 350 species. We're probably not going to make a video covering every single species in the Artiodactyla anytime soon. Native even-toed ungulates are today found on every continent except for Antarctica and Australia, and are found in all of the world's oceans. They're even likely responsible for driving the largest false penguin of all time into extinction. The oldest fossil evidence of them is over 50 million years old, but we find such fossils in North America, Europe, and Asia, so it's hard to say where the group originated. It was pretty easy to get from North America to Europe to Asia at that time, so it isn't really strange that they would end up in all 3 of those places pretty quickly. As we discussed earlier, the even-toed ungulates put their weight on an even number of toes, at least if they support their weight on their toes at all. 2 toes to be precise, with hooves. Again, if they support their weight at all. Most of them are also herbivorous, as we saw in the odd-toed ungulates. And plant cellulose is actually rather difficult to digest fully, and requires the assistance of many symbiotic microbes. Odd-toed ungulates, like most mammalian herbivores, digest cellulose with the aid of microbes in their intestines. They're called hindgut fermenters. But most herbivorous even-toed ungulates do it in 1 or more stomach chambers. They are called foregut fermenters. And of the even-toed foregut fermenters, the family most distantly related to the rest are these. The 7 species of camels, llamas, alpacas, vicuñas, and guanacos in the family Camelidae. Which are weird for a number of reasons, but let's start with the fact that they don't have hooves. They have 2 weight-bearing toes, but just toenails, like an ostrich. Their limbs are also attached at the hip, but without the skin and muscle attachments going all the way to the knee that we find in most of the Euungulates, making it a lot easier to see all of the parts of their legs. They also have crazy teeth, with not only canines, but incisor teeth and premolars that all look like canines. So they look like they have a bunch of canine teeth. And they have a split upper lip, where each side can be controlled and moved independently. Camelids first appeared in North America and made it to every continent except Australia and Antarctica. They were driven to extinction in North America in the very recent past, and likely by humans. But introduced to Australia by humans, so I guess we're calling it a wash. Like giraffes that we will discuss later, camelids move both legs on each side at the same time, giving them a very unique gait. And if you think that modern camelids look a little like giraffes, wait until you find out about Apicamelus, which essentially was a North American giraffe, except it was a camelid. I would love to do a camelid video just so we can dig into that and discuss the fact that they have fat, not water, in their humps, and why that's way better than having water. Of course, camels are not the large ungulates best adapted to life in the desert. I'll be discussing what that animal is and why they are better suited to desert survival in this week's Patreon Extras video. So if you want to see that or the host of other features that we have for our patrons, please consider checking it out. But now that we're over the hump, I think we can discuss the next most basal group of extant Eventoadunulates, the two families of pigs and peccaries in the clade Swina. And I'm grateful to have made this video because I didn't know that peccaries were not pigs before I started researching this group. They are the hagfish of pigs. Pigs are the 18 or 19 species in the family Suidae, which does include warthogs. Sorry, Pumbaa.
Hey, who's the pig?
Are you talking to me?
Uh-oh, they called him a pig.
Are you talking to me?
Shouldn't have done that.
Are you talking to me?
Now they're in for it.
They call me Mr. Pig! Ah!
Also boars, hogs, bush pigs, and the ever so crazy looking babirussas. Originating from Asia, native species are found today in Africa, Asia, and Europe. They can be distinguished from most other Eventoadungulates as they have 4 hooves on each foot, though they place their weight primarily on 2, like everyone else that places weight. And pigs do not have the complex stomach of foregut fermenters. They are hindgut fermenters. They have big heads, small eyes, and large ears, with a very distinctive round or oval shaped nose. They're round-bodied like tapirs and rhinos with short tails and a phallus shaped like that of a duck. If you know, you know. Here's a video you can't unsee. Their canines are modified into tusks, which are sometimes quite extreme. Sometimes they end up growing back into the brain case, causing death. I call that extreme. And they have upper incisors, which is something that we will not see in many other Eventoadungulates. I could see making a video about all of the pigs. The question is, would it also include the other family in the Swina, the family Teaswidae, the 3 or 4 species of peccaries found in the Americas, which are very social creatures that live in groups called a squadron. I could not love that more. Originating in North America, they have since colonized both American continents. But given that invasive pigs are now common in many parts of the peccary range, it is beneficial to be able to distinguish between them. And in most ways, they do look very similar. They have a similar shape with large heads and small eyes, though the ears of peccaries are less pointed and generally smaller than those of pigs. Pig tails are tasseled at the end, where peccary tails are smaller and relatively untasseled. Peccaries, unlike pigs, may have only 2 total toes, so they don't have 4 conspicuous hooves on each foot like pigs. Their tusks also look more like giant canine teeth than they do like tusks. They also have a multi-chambered stomach and have independently evolved foregut fermentation, unlike their cousins the pigs, which again have simple stomachs and are hindgut fermenters. Peccaries are also, as a group, smaller than pigs, which can get as large as 275 kilos, a touch over 600 pounds. Peccaries max out at more like 40 kilos, which is less than 90 pounds. And that brings us to the 2 largest clades of ungulates, the approximately 200 species of ruminants in the clade Ruminantia, and the 90 or so species in the delightfully named clade whippomorpha. Hippomorpha because it includes hippos, but why the because it contains whales. That's why. But I'll start with the ruminants because I've mostly made this video because I wanted to talk about pronghorns. And this clade is all kinds of full of foregut fermenters with rad head weapons. One of my favorite moments of my childhood was spending a half an hour or so watching a tiny little antelope called the Kirk's dik-dik chew its cud. Something that is very common among foregut fermenters. Heck, the word ruminant means to chew again. A little extra chewing never hurt anyone. I mean, just ask rabbits. They're not even foregut fermenters. Awkward. But the good thing about ruminants is that they don't pass their plant matter all the way through their digestive systems before bringing it back around for a little bonus chewing. And ruminants are not the first foregut fermenters that we've discussed, but they are the only ones with a 4-chambered stomach. Camelids, for example, only have 3 chambers. So these are 4-chambered foregut fermenters with often fun, sometimes forked fighting implements fused to their faces and foreheads. However, the basalmost family of 4-chambered foregut fermenters fails to fashion any form of forehead fighting implements or even formidable size. And that would be the 10 species of mouse deer in the family Tragulidae. Tragulidae means tiny goat. Now in reality, mouse deer aren't mice, deer, or goats, but they are the smallest hoofed animals on the planet, so they are pretty tiny. The largest species only gets to be about 16 kilos. That's about 35 pounds. Small for the biggest one, but not that small. But some are only about 1 kilo, like 2 pounds. That's a very small ungulate. And while they don't have any horns, antlers, or other forehead fighting implements, they do have some tremendous and terrifying teeth, earning them the name fanged deer. These giant canine teeth are particularly prominent in males and are used in combat. So this is a saber-tooth, not deer or goat. Not the only one, but one of them. Most of them are found in Asia and feed entirely on plants. But the largest species, found in Africa, is highly aquatic and feeds not only on plants, but also on things like insects and crabs. Fanged false deer appear to be the most similar in basic body plan to the common ancestor of all ruminants, which means that they are probably the most similar to the ancestors that were shared with the whippomorpha. And suddenly, the idea that the ancestors of hippos and whales might have been little hoofed ungulates seems to make a lot more sense. But the closest relatives to the fanged false deer are the rest of the Ruminantia, the 5 families in the clade Peckery, the Hornbearers, though only one family actually has true horns. Most of them do have some sort of interoral noggin spikes. The noggin spikers fall into 2 clades, and I'm going to start with the clade that contains the true horns, because that will help us make more sense of the non-horns when we get to them. So the clade of hornbearers with true horns contains 3 families. The basalmost family, the true deer of the family Cervidae, doesn't have any true horns, but we'll get to them in a second. The other 2 families are the Bovidae and the Muscidae, and it is the Bovids that have true horns. Muscids don't have any weapons protruding from their frontal bones, but don't worry, they aren't unarmed. More saber-toothed teeth are coming. But I want to start with the Bovids and work our way to the pronghorns. Bovids are a diverse clade containing over 140 species, the majority of all ungulates, which is at least part of why I often feel like I struggle with this group. But they come in a variety of unique forms, from monsters like buffalo and bison, to agile gazelles, to torpedo-shaped duikers, and pretty much everything in between. I think a video just about them would be wonderful. If you're wondering if we're running out of groups to discuss, the answer is no. Bovids came out of Africa and Eurasia about 20 million years ago. Most species are still found in Africa, though they are also present in Asia and Europe and North America. The most distinctive thing about bovids is that all males and many females possess horns. The easiest way to identify a horn at a glance is that it's an unbranching, hard, pointed structure growing out of the frontal bone of the animal. Just this is enough to distinguish them from antlers, ossicones, or pronghorns. What you might not see at a glance is that the horn is a keratin sheath over a live bony core, neither of which are ever shed. And this alone will distinguish them from their closest relatives, the 7 species of musk deer, which aren't deer, of the family Muscidae. Musk deer have no horns at all, but they do have head weapons, some spectacular saber teeth. Unlike their 2 closest relatives, musk deer do not have a scent gland right in front of their eyes, called a preorbital gland. But instead, males have a musk gland located on the venter just below the belly button. This lack of a preorbital gland, as well as knowing that they are found mostly in high altitude locations in Asia, can assist in distinguishing them from water deer, which look very similar but are actual deer. So let's talk about the 55 species of true deer, including elk, moose, muntjacs, caribou, and reindeer of the family Cervidae. They do have preorbital glands, just like bovids. But in general, it is easy to distinguish them from bovids because males, and some females, possess antlers instead of horns. At a glance, antlers can be identified quickly by the fact that they generally branch, something that horns never do, though they aren't the only branching ruminant head weapons. So in addition to branching, it is good to know that antlers are primarily made of dead bone, with no keratin sheath, just skin like velvet that is shed once the antlers are fully grown annually. Antlers are generally grown every year and shed following the breeding season, something that never happens in bovids. Deer are natively found on every continent except for Antarctica and Australia, though there is just one species in Africa, the realm of the bovids. And they are another group that we really need to explore in greater detail sometime soon. I mean, moose get to be 2.6 meters tall. That's 8.5 feet and weigh up to 800 kilograms, around 1,800 pounds. I just don't think that moose get enough love. But now I want to make our way over to the other clade of living horn bearers, because these 2 families are pure joy. I mean, one of them are the Giraffidae of Africa, which, as we discussed in our Lego reaction video, have disproportionately short necks, though very long necks. Of the 2 to 9 species, depending on who you talk to, the only one without a crazy long neck is the okapi, which is definitely one of my favorite creatures. Giraffes not only have long necks, super long legs, and short bodies, but long, purplish, prehensile tongues that they use to strip leaves from trees. You know a giraffe when you see one. But the most unique feature of giraffes are their ossicones. Ossicones are the crazy head weapons on top of all male giraffes, and most females as well. They're similar to horns in that they're in roughly the same location, don't branch, and have a live bone core. Interestingly, as they grow, that core is cartilage, and it doesn't actually fuse to the skull until after the giraffe reaches maturity, and it might need to start bashing the heck out of its neighbors with them. Are we going to make a whole video about giraffes just so we can talk about this absurd combat? Yes, we are. For sure we are. But the most obvious thing that differentiates ossicones from horns is that the outer sheath is made of skin instead of keratin. And that gets us to their closest relatives, the inappropriately named pronghorn antelope of the family Antilocapridae, which aren't antelopes. Though they are the fastest land ungulates on the planet, and the fastest running animals, period, over long distances. There is one carnivoran that is faster over short distances. They look, at a glance, like antelope, but being in North America, you shouldn't confuse the two. There are no antelopes in the Western Hemisphere. But you could also look at the fact that they only have 2 toes, where all bovids have 4. This will help you distinguish them from cervids, but not giraffes. Add to that they essentially have ossicones, a live bone core covered in skin. Outside of the breeding season, it really looks like an ossicone. Unlike ossicones, but like horns, it develops a keratinous sheath during the breeding season. Unlike horns, it's forked and shed annually and has skin under it on top of the bone core. Pronghorns are wild structures, and there is only one species left on Earth that has them. I feel very blessed that I get to see these rad little giraffe cousins with some regularity here in Utah. But that brings us to the last clade of ungulates, the delightfully named whippomorpha, which includes, of course, the 2 species of hippopotamuses in the family Hippopotamidae, and the roughly 94 species of whales in the clade Cetacea. Hippos, possessing 4 toes and 3-chambered stomachs, are pretty clearly non-ruminant artiodactyls, but just where they belong has long been a subject of debate. However, today, it seems pretty clear that they are sister to the whales. And if you had to pick a closest ungulate relative to whales, is this not what you would think it would be? Though they once had a larger range expanding into Eurasia, today they are found native only in Africa. Though they are introduced into South America. What a thing to introduce. They are unguligrade, but like camels, they do not have hooves, just toenails. They're somewhat pig-like in shape with large mouths and terrifying canines and incisors. And they would be the second largest of all ungulates at around 1,500 kilos or 3,300 pounds if it weren't for their closest relatives, the whales. And if you want to know more about whales, you should watch this video about all of them right now. As always, like and subscribe, and we hope to see you real soon. J-Lo style hindquarters with short tails.
You did not just say that.
I did indeed.
Wow. What? Clint!
Look it up.
What do you mean, look it up?
Look at the side profile of a tapir.
Look at the side profile.
It was standing there looking at me.
Videos of
No, this was in person, face to face, and it was, it was in a. If I had a camera at the time, I would have taken a number of pics. Jason.